Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you are doing very well. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Language Nerd. This is the show where I take a lot of your guys' questions from a variety of social media networks and I answer them in video form. If you ever want to submit something for the show, you're welcome to do so. I will put my social media networks on the screen right now and you're welcome to hit me up. With that aside, let's jump into the show. The first question we have is, Azren, how do you think I can best make the jump from a B2 level in French to a C1? In other words, how can I go from like an upper intermediate and break that barrier into advanced? Now, the first thing I'd recommend is you need to figure out what are the aspects or what are the elements of the language that are holding you back. For example, are you held back by listening comprehension? Are you held back by, reading comprehension? Is it your writing? What is it that's holding you back? And you have to tackle that problem. I think one mistake that a lot of people will make is they try to look at things in very general terms, in very broad terms. They say, I want to go from intermediate to advanced. Well, there's a lot of elements that would need to be worked on to make that jump, and maybe you're really good at some of those elements and really bad at other elements, right? So I think you need to figure out what your biggest weaknesses are and try and tackle those. I think that's probably a good place to start. The next question we have is, Azren, I need your advice in order to achieve maximum benefit from reading books in English. What would you recommend? When it comes to this question, I think the big thing is you need to define, first of all, what does it mean to achieve maximum benefit? What are you trying to get out of it? I think that's always when you're trying to achieve a goal, any kind of goal, I think you need to make sure you're extremely crystal clear on what that means for you. Now, a couple of general things I will say. Number one, read things that are at your level. If you're reading things that are way too hard or way too complicated, you will not be able to learn from it. And the other thing I would say is, depending on what your definition is of maximum benefit, I'd make sure that when you learn something new by reading, you make efforts to apply that in the real world. So if you learn some new vocabulary, try and incorporate it in your speech, or try to go out of your way to incorporate it in writing, or if you're talking to someone. I think that's a mistake people make, is they do lots of reading and they get all this knowledge in their brain, which helps with the comprehension side of things, but it doesn't push them or help them improve with the writing or the speaking side of things. So I'd highly recommend you take that knowledge and try and apply it to make sure that it's moving the speaking and writing side of your language abilities forward as well. The next question we have is, Azren, do you have any language game ideas? This is a great question. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of language games that you can play, but the one thing I will say that is practical for virtually everyone is the following. Every single turn-based game can incorporate a language element. For example, let's say we're playing a card game, poker or rummy or anything. All you need to do in every single turn is, before you take your turn, say one sentence in whatever language you want to practice. That is a very practical way that anyone can incorporate languages into a game. If you want to go a step further, what you can even do is, when you're saying your one sentence, phrase your sentence or choose your sentence according to whatever you are practicing in that language. For example, if you're practicing the present tense, say a sentence in the present tense. If you're practicing colors, say a color in that language, excuse me. If you are practicing past tense, say something in the past tense. Practicing whatever it is, right? Use the elements of the language that you are weak at, and when you take your turn in whatever game you are playing, make sure you are saying something or using something in that language that builds on the thing that you are bad at. The next question we have is, Azren, I'm always looking for ways to promote pronunciation practice in fun and engaging ways. I'm curious if you have any advice to do this, and if you have any advice to help students develop their ear for different sounds. This is a really good question. I think when it comes to developing your ear, it just needs repetition. You just need to practice hearing different sounds and distinguishing them. I don't think there's any particular tips or tricks or any particular shortcuts. Maybe I'm wrong, and if you know any, let me know in the comments below, because I would love to actually read them and maybe educate myself even. However, in terms of ways to teach pronunciation, there's many many. I would say a really good strategy is if you can actually show someone what is happening in the mouth to say a specific sound. So for example, maybe I'm trying to explain a French R or a French whatever or a Spanish this or a Mandarin that, whatever it is. If you can show what's happening in the mouth, so take your phone, like flip it towards yourself and record the inside of your mouth and show it to your student. That is a very practical way to help someone pronounce something. I think the other way as well, which is similar, is if you can describe what's happening in your mouth. If you can describe, okay, take the tip of your tongue, place it here, then do this. If you can do that, that's another really good way to help with pronunciation. And also what can help is if you can find a halfway sound. For example, let's say somebody is struggling with the letter L in English, like a L sound, like they can't go la 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 la. Let's say they can't do that for whatever reason. See if they can pronounce an N, because na 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 na. Your tongue, when you say the letter N, is in a very close spot in your mouth to the letter L. So if you can first help them pronounce the letter N, and that's the first thing you can do, you can then say, okay, notice when you went from the letter, I don't know, this letter to an N, you moved your tongue to the front of your mouth. We gotta keep moving your tongue forward till it's like right against your top two teeth to get to that L sound, right? So if you can find that halfway sound, find a sound that is relatively similar and do that, that can be a good way to coach somebody and guide them into the correct pronunciation of a specific sound. Next question is, Azren, what are the different job or career options that you could pursue in the field of languages? I think there's some different options. First of all, you could obviously be a teacher, you can be a translator or interpreter, you could work for an airline company, you could be a tour guide. I think those are some of the common ones that you would hear. But one thing that's really practical, I think, is if you combine your ability with languages with another skill altogether. I'll give you an example. I currently have a French client who has a business and he deals with a lot of French customers. And one of the reasons why I'm able to work with him, that he likes having me, is because I have a skill set with videos. I know how to edit, I'm decent on camera, and for his line of work, he needs some of those skills as well. So what happens is that I have the combination of French and videos, which then has landed me some work. So I think if you have another skill and you can combine your ability with languages with something else, that is something that's extremely practical. And I think that can really land you some interesting jobs and positions, etc., etc. The other thing I will say, if it's something that interests you, is if you start talking about languages online. So look at what I'm doing. I post very actively. I have a very active online presence where I'm sharing my passion for languages, because you start to get things that come to you that maybe you didn't even know were options. For example, you guys saw a couple weeks ago, I posted, phone's ringing, but that's okay. A couple weeks ago, I posted a talk where I spoke at an event. I didn't know I could be paid to talk at an event about something, but that landed in my lap because I decided to start podcasting. So if I hadn't made that decision, it wouldn't have come to me. So I think with the internet, another practical thing to do is start talking about some of your passions, because maybe, you never know, maybe nothing will happen, but maybe something will happen and something comes to you that you didn't even know was possible. So that's something to think about as well. The next one we have here is not really a question, but rather it's a comment on a comment. Somebody left a comment on my episode of Cultural Corner where I was talking to one of my Russian followers. I did an interview with him and we discussed many elements of Russia. And this individual here wrote a comment basically disagreeing with a lot of the things, or many of the things, that my interviewee had said. The guy who left the comment even said, like, yeah, there's not only one type of person in Russia, almost everything the interviewee said is a mess of stereotypes, it's not true, make sure you're talking to the sane people, the right people in Russia, get the right perspectives, etc. And my comment to this is the following. I think when it comes to cultural understanding, one of the most important things is to get a variety of different perspectives. It's not just about hearing one person's opinion or one group of people's opinion. You want many different opinions. You want lots of different sources of input. So this comment, I could see how some people might not like it. I could understand that, right? And on the other hand, I could see why a lot of people agree. Like, I could see both sides. But I'm extremely happy to get the other side of the coin and to hear somebody who disagreed with my interviewees' perspectives and opinions on Russia, because that gives me yet another data point of how Russian people feel on different topics. And honestly, I'm someone who believes that it's by having those hundreds or thousands or however many number of data points and hearing lots of perspectives, that's the only way to fully understand another person, another culture, another region. It's the only real way. So I guess my comment to this is thank you, I guess. Thank you. Like, there's a lot of stuff you wrote, and it gives me a lot of data and perspective. The final thing I'll say on this comment is a lot of people, I think, get caught up on right and wrong. Like, you know, some people might say, oh, this guy's comment is right and what the interviewee said is wrong, or vice versa, right? There's people that will get into that debate. And oftentimes, or in many cases, I'm not interested in deciding what's right and wrong. In many cases, I'm just interested in hearing all the perspectives. I'm interested in hearing, sitting back, absorbing, and just analyzing and just dissecting it and trying to understand all the different sides. I just think that's a healthy perspective to have in many situations. So with that aside, let's wrap the video up there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your attention, and we'll talk in the next episode. Talk in the next video. Bye for now.